Hello viewers, in this video of the Virtual SG series, we will uncover the unique heritage of Singapore by making stops at Chinatown, Blair Road, and Kampong Glam. The word heritage may inspire different meanings and even blanks among non-English speakers, but essentially it has its origins from the word inheritance, prized possessions that have been passed from generation to generation. In this context, the unique heritage of Singapore attempts to unveil traditions and assets that have been handed down to stand the test of time. Our trip begins at Tourism Court in the Tanglin area, via Orchard Road and Suntec City. Our first stop is at Chinatown, and then Blair Road via Southbridge Road and Neil Road. Lastly, we head for Kampong Glam via Eu Tong Sen Street, Victoria Street, and Ophir Road. Beginning at Tourism Court in the Tanglin area, we make passage through condominiums and bungalows of the rich and wealthy onto the shopping malls of Orchard Road. At first a patchwork of nutmeg orchards, and then a favorite amongst colonial families and the deceased looking for respite from the buzz of town living. This road is now frequently associated with the words shopping and Christmas. Goods and gifts from all over the world in all manners may be found along the street, making it a prime destination for shopping. As if to encourage the festivities, shopping malls compete to outdo each other on Christmas decorations. The street itself is decked out in baubles and hollies between November and December, offering a very Singaporean perspective of Christmas in the tropics. One of the first shopping malls to appear on the street is the tackily Oriental-themed Tangs. The well-established brand name has operated at this location since 1958. Another stalwart of Orchard Road is the Hilton Singapore Orchard. Beginning in 1971 as the Mandarin Singapore, the arches at the top of what was then the tallest hotel in Singapore made it a standout building on the street, identifiable even from miles away. Even more remarkable is the fact that the building was constructed with the help of women laborers known as Sam Sui women. Less visible but even more famous is the Presidential Palace of Singapore. More commonly called the Istana, the 100-acre grounds was a project sparing no expense after Singapore acquired Crown Colony status in the British Empire. The main building is neo-Palladian with a layout and structure size for the tropical climate when air conditioning was not yet invented. It was transformed from the Governor's House into its present-day name when Singapore acquired self-government in 1959. The building is not visible from a street. But the Heritage Gallery, just across from the entrance, displays some of the gifts received from dignitaries invited to visit. As an immigrant nation, whose majority of citizens have a local presence dating back not more than 4 generations, education holds high importance as a means to climb up the economic and social ladder. Unlike today, most immigrants that came to Singapore at its infancy as a trading port came in the most desperate of circumstances. For the Chinese, it was driven by famine and war in the homeland, while for the Indians, it was forceful deployment as convicts. Settling here for good and seeing advantage in being English-speaking and skilled, many automatically held education in high regard for their children if they could afford it. Many schools were established to this end in the Bras Basah district by missions and Sir Stamford Raffles, the founder of Singapore himself, as part of their civilizing agenda. The Bras Basah area continues to retain its identity as an arts and education district, with institutions such as the School of the Arts and Singapore Management University making their mark in festivities around the area. Some old institutions, such as CHIJ, St. Joseph's Institution, and Catholic High School, outgrew their original buildings and moved out into the suburbs. These buildings find new purpose as art incubators, museums, and event halls. One institution that has not changed is the Raffles Hotel. As the source of the Singapore Sling cocktail and reputed venue in which Rudyard Kipling wrote his classic Jungle Book, the hotel's long bar and writer's bar is often on the visitors' list of things to see. While the building is mostly unchanged, its surroundings have been updated tremendously. The once seafront view that would have greeted guests is no more. Replaced with the mega development of Suntec City, a multi-use complex anchored by then Asia's largest columnless convention and exhibition center. The success of this venture between the government of Singapore and Hong Kong businessmen got metaphysical help in the form of feng shui. For example, the Fountain of Wealth in the roundabout sits at the center of what seems to be a left palm formed by the 5 office towers shaped to resemble a thumb and fingers. The concept of feng shui may not be clear to some, but essentially it is the purposeful placement of the orientation of objects relative to one's environment so that a state of harmony and balance is achieved in your favor. Perhaps affected by Suntec City, buildings in the Marina Centre area tend to lend greater emphasis to this concept. The Singapore Flyer is a welcome addition to the confluence of the Singapore and Kallang rivers. With 28 capsules for 28 passengers each, the 30-minute rotation up and down the 165-meter high wheel started operations in 2008. Notice the many eights in the design of this development, as the sound of 8 in Mandarin rings similar to the sound of fortune. Performance arts get their stage at the Floating Platform and Esplanade theatres. The Floating Platform was the venue for the opening ceremony of the first Youth Olympic Games. It also features frequently on National Day celebrations and more recently as sitting for the Formula One Grand Prix. Its functional yet colorful seats are in stark contrast to the spiky, domed roofs of the Esplanade's twin halls. Which, as a matter of coincidence, pays homage to the most revered fruit of Singaporeans, the durian. The seasonal but celebrated fruit, with its pungent smell and yellow pulp, is often shared between family and friends, much like music and dance. We take leave from the modern district that was built out of reclaimed land and enter the older civic district from which stemmed the administration of the island. The highest court of the land, the Supreme Court, sits along North Bridge Road, just before the Parliament of Singapore. The Supreme Court represents the judicial and the Parliament represents legislative branch of government, respectively. Many of our laws are based on the English common law and penal code handed down from British India. Examples include the capital punishment by hanging and unnatural sex. Among the new laws made in the unicameral House of Parliament and enforced in the Court of Law are the many fines and penalties for petty misdemeanors such as littering, jaywalking, and most famous of all, chewing gum. Beyond the laws made by men are laws determined by the gods, for which there are many given the secular nature of Singaporean society. Such is the social fabric that on this street in Chinatown, a mosque, Hindu temple, and Buddhist temple all coexist alongside in harmony. The ethnic quarter of Chinatown is a legacy of the British that has stuck in a now Chinese majority country, with ethnic Chinese comprising 75% of citizens. It had its origins in the 1822 Raffles Town Plan as a means to organize possible friction between cultures from different lands. No consideration was given to the practical needs of the ethnic groups in this division. So it was that Chulia Mosque and Sri Mariamman Temple, with their need for a source of water for worship activities, found itself in the heart of Chinatown. As major landmarks that stand out from the standard of the mill shop houses, the names of roads took after them. Sri Mariamman Temple has been discussed in a previous video. This temple is dedicated to the goddess of rain and health. As early as 1827, Hindu devotees who hailed southern India said their prayers here. The temple subscribes to the Vaishnavist denomination, where the Vishnu family of gods and their preserving abilities are emphasized. In South Indian tradition, the temple gates are crowned by a tiered pagoda of figurines representing various gods in Hinduism. That pagoda, also known as a gopuram, is the one that Pagoda Street refers to. Now pedestrianized, the street extends beyond the walls of Sri Mariamman Temple and Chulia Mosque into shop houses that once housed opium dens and Chinese migrants. Most Chinese migrants that arrived by ship worked as stevedores, providing hard labor for maritime merchants. These men took on the local name of coolies, Chinese for hard labor. Following a back-breaking day and returning to crowded living conditions, many escaped the realities of life through opium smoking. Because of Singapore's status as a free port, opium revenue contributed to most of the colony's budget. However, the proliferation of opium trading brought with it a new set of problems, notably secret society and tribe wars over control of the market. The practice of opium smoking was made illegal in 1946. To escape the tribulations of life today, citizens engage in the far more healthful activities of line dancing and sport. To understand more about the life of early settlers in Chinatown, the Chinatown Heritage Center's collection of 3 shophouses is an excellent walkthrough. As of this video, the museum is temporarily closed, having changed ownership recently. The once gritty and unkempt shophouses were conserved by repair and paintwork in the 1970s as a way to preserve and inject life into century-old buildings. Over 6,500 of such shophouses were acquired, restored, and then sold to the private hands for profit. The once walk-up residential nature of these shophouses and their established trades on the ground floor surrendered themselves to companies and business merchants with deeper pockets, turning this street and the ones next to it into a tourist trap of souvenir shops. Especially obvious are the ones lining up on Terengganu Street, which in the past served a more local clientele. The Lai Chun Yun Opera House was an anchor of the red light district, providing entertainment for the masses before the invention of movies. Chinese opera performances are today relegated to religious events for the entertainment of gods and spirits. Remaining persistent in the ever-changing world is the staple of foods consumed. Many immigrant favorites continue to thrive in the country's largest hawker center, Chinatown Complex. Most were relocated from the streets around Chinatown into the more sanitary conditions of stores on the second level. Foods such as mincemeat noodles, chicken rice, Yong Tau Fu, and Hokkien Mee are on offer at multiple stalls for affordable prices. Some have even received Michelin star ratings and mentions. A more recent addition to Chinatown is the Buddha Tooth Relic Temple. Opened on Vesak Day in 2007, the temple's fourth level contains a 3.5-ton gilded stupa under which the tooth of Buddha sits. The 7.5-centimeter tooth was uncovered in a collapsed stupa in Myanmar. The tooth relic first came to Singapore in 2002 as part of an exhibition. It received such overwhelming response that it was decided to build a monastery worthy of the tooth. Donations of cash and gold poured in for the effort. The $75 million building was then completed in the northern Chinese Buddhist style of temple, a marked difference to the established southern style temples in Singapore. The tooth is not without its detractors, with some expressing skepticism over its authenticity. Despite being challenged, a DNA test for the relic was denied by temple authorities. The main hall, also known as the 100 Dragon Hall, seats the Maitreya of future Buddha, 15 feet in height. He adopts the Abhaya Mudra and Varada Mudra palms on his right and left hand, respectively. The upright and open palm gestures safety and divine protection, while the other also open palm dispenses goodwill. Behind the main hall is another manifestation of Buddha. Here in the Universal Wisdom Hall, Buddha takes the form of the compassionate and merciful Guan Yin. The 6 arms represent the 6 realms of existence: hell, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, gods, and demigods, states of existence through which life cycles. From the crowded quarters inside shophouses, living conditions improved post-independence as the newly formed government made housing a priority. The Housing and Development Board flats here at Banda Street and Kreta Ayer are some of the early flats completed to rehouse a growing population of migrants who decided to call this island their home. Social housing reached its pinnacle in the project of the same name on Neil Road. A set of 7 50-story high blocks linked by sky bridges. The result of a worldwide design contest, this collection of towers are the world's tallest public residential buildings. More than 80% of Singaporeans live in social housing flats, not too different from these. From the common to the uncommon, we now approach a neighborhood with preserved old-style housing for the rich, namely Peranagans. The Peranagans are a peculiar group developed prior to the arrival of the British. The group persisted through insular marriages within its community of Babas and Nyonyas. The people trace their ancestry to a mixed marriage of Chinese merchants and Malay ladies, which over time adopted a selective combination of cultural traditions from China and the Malay Peninsula, including attire, embroidery, and cooking. The advantages afforded by their mixed background in languages and connections made these people rich in the trading business. Well before the British. The arrival of the British only served to hasten their accumulation of fortunes and spread of business over the region as the first natives to be anglicized in English schools. With their riches, Peranakan families invested much into the building of their homes, heavily influenced by both superstition and traditional pride. As an upper-class residential enclave of the early 20th century, elaborate styles are found on the facade of houses in this area. In 1991, the entire area was gazetted by the Urban Redevelopment Authority for conservation. The ornamental woodwork of roof eaves is commonly associated with Malay art styles. While French windows provide ventilation and European flavor alongside Greco-Roman columns. The bat-wing-shaped air vents have influences from the Chinese association of bat with good fortune, while eagles are a common symbol of the elite. Especially Peranakan is the pintu pagar, a half door that allows ventilation into the household while providing privacy to its residents. The door is often used as a display of wealth through the use of intricate wood pattern carvings on its body. Balanced alongside by colorful tiles that line the building walls depicting flowers. Our route resumes along Kampong Baru Road onto Eu Tong Sen Street, passing the Singapore General Hospital. One of the legacies of British colonial administration was the gift of medicine. The oldest and largest hospital in the country had its origins in 1821, just after the founding of the settlement. Amongst its patients are seafarers, soldiers, and natives. Facilities and staff, however, were grossly inadequate, so much so that convict labor was mobilized for nursing services. It was not until 1981 that the campus took its current form, with the opening of 8 blocks of wards and specialist clinics. The healthcare system underwent significant restructuring to introduce competition and efficiencies into the delivery of medical services. Public hospitals were corporatized and given greater autonomy in management. At the same time, compulsory savings for medical events was introduced for all citizens in the form of MediSave and MediShield. This, in addition to government subsidies based on means testing, keeps healthcare costs affordable to all those who need it. Also having origins within the campus is the King Edward VII College of Medicine, whose building now houses the Ministry of Health. The predecessor of the National University of Singapore's Faculty of Medicine started in 1905 to train doctors and nurses for local needs. The long legacy of medical training, discovery, and quality of care in Singapore makes the island nation the foremost destination in the region for advanced procedures such as transplants. Medical care in Singapore, however, is not restricted to Western principles. The legacy of traditional Chinese and Malay and Indian medicine continues to persist and is sometimes performed in combination with Western treatment for better effect. The 1,000-year-old philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine is based on the concept of yin and yang, or hot and cold. Illness is thought to be caused by an imbalance of 2 opposing poles. Herbs and tonics are often brewed and consumed to right the imbalance. The simplest and most accessible of such medicine is the herbal tea or Wuhan Guo, which is retailed in the medical shops of Chinatown. Where aches and pains come into the picture, acupuncture and massage techniques come in. One free institution that had its beginnings in the 1890s using donations from Chinese businessmen such as Gan Eng Seng, is the Tong Chai Medical Hall. While the institution has since moved into larger premises north of Chinatown at Chin Sui, the former building, in secular Chinese style, has been preserved and gazetted as a national monument. When all hope is lost, faith may be the final thing that works. During a time when diseases were not fully understood and life is hard, prayers are a source of comfort and salvation for the heart. The Old Armenian Church is the oldest Christian church in Singapore. The small community of merchants found their way into Singapore after having been displaced from their homeland in Azerbaijan by war. Across the road, Masjid al-Burhani is a mosque for the Dawoodi Bohra community, who trace their lineage to India. Plenty of religious institutions serving different sections of the community line Victoria Street. Including the Cathedral of the Good Shepherd, and St. Joseph's Church for Catholics. For there are affairs of the heart that not even the best medicine can heal. Despite the backgrounds and differences in faith, language, skin color, and home countries, all the communities of Singapore shared in the pain of World War II between 1942 and 1945. The mighty British Empire surrendered the impregnable fortress of Singapore to Japan in just 7 days. 50,000 Chinese civilians were believed to have been purged, and 80,000 soldiers kept prisoners of war, with many sent to work on the Death Railway in Thailand. Despite the loss of loved ones and freedom, faith kept hopes up that the occupation would draw to a close. Attitudes towards Singapore changed following the war. The failure of the British to adequately protect and provide for residents, as well as events happening in China and India, encouraged independence movements toward home rule in Singapore. A change in mindset from a temporary place of work to a permanent place to live radically changed the outlook of Singapore as investment into the future of the country gathered pace. One of the great infrastructure projects to be started is the mass rapid transit railway system, which today is still expanding. The first stations, such as Bugis, provided a convenient and reliable way to get from the outskirts of the island into the heart of the city. Another major infrastructure project is the North-South Corridor, a semi-expressway cum bicycle highway that will provide a fast connection to the north of Singapore. Greater focus is spent on improving the cityscape from looking like a jungle of harsh concrete blocks to a backyard of parks and trees. Historical quarters are preserved in the pursuit of a national identity. The Kampung Glam Quarter has its beginnings with royalty sanctioned by the British. To found the trading port of Singapore, the British under the East India Company picked the side of Hussein Shah in a succession dispute of the Johor Riau Sultanate. In recognizing Hussein Shah over Abdul Rahman as Sultan, they obtained and legitimized the trading concession of Singapore in the Treaty of 1819. The new Sultan was then allocated the grounds of Kampung Glam on which to build his royal residence. The royal status did not last beyond a few years, as a subsequent treaty in 1824 forced the complete transfer of power to the British Crown. At first a wooden structure, the concrete building at the center began to take form in the 1840s with influences from both the Malay and English world. It was commissioned by Tengku Ali Iskandar, Sultan Hussein's son, and served as the residence for their descendants until 1999, when the government negotiated for the conversion of the grounds into the Malay Heritage Centre. It was after this that the two wings on the left and right were added. The Malay Heritage Centre documents both important personalities of the Malay world in Singapore, as well as the significance of Kampong Glam as a regional transit centre for Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. As a major port of call and with passage by steamship being the predominant mode of transport in the early 19th and 20th century, Muslims from all over the region called into Kampong Glam before their epic journey halfway round the world. Today, this scene is accelerated and repeated further east of the island at the aviation hub of Changi Airport. While Kampong Glam is a shadow of its former self, finding renewed purpose as an enclave for avant-garde arts. Shophouses that once served as boarding facilities for pilgrims in transit serve Middle Eastern cuisine that rival their native homelands. A street away, hipster shops front the narrow Haji Lane with tattoo services, cafe, and beer still within an earshot of the Sultan Mosque's regular call to prayer. Such is the secular and peaceful coexistence of diverging principles, unique to Singapore. As the tallest structure in Kampong Glam, the Sultan Mosque is both a local landmark and national monument. The mosque is named after its original sponsor, the Sultan of Singapore. Its current building was, however, constructed nearly a century after the Sultan's installation, with proceeds from the community. The grounds up mosque building effort is remembered by the ring of glass bottles that sit under the gilded dome of the structure. Many of the poor who had no money to spare contributed glass bottles to the building effort, which in the time before the invention of plastic was a valuable resource. The mausoleum of Tengku Alam, son of Tengku Ali and grandson of Sultan Hussein, is also located on the grounds on the west side of the mosque. The heritage of Singapore brings to mind a sense of familiarity and also one of wonder. As a palette of cultures and influences from other parts of the world meld into one surprising result. Instead of colliding, civilizations coalesced using the strengths of one and advantages of another to result in a unique blend of properties that is now Singaporean.